Good morning. Thank you to the Ministry Council, Kelly and Thomas, for the invitation to speak here today. It's been a long time since I occupied this spot, and I'm glad to be here again today with you. So today, let's talk about understanding. The lead scripture from Proverbs equates understanding with wisdom. It incorporates into understanding learning and knowledge, righteousness and justice, listening and discerning. In Acts, the Ethiopian traveler asks, "How can I understand?" He needs a guide. Understanding for him comes through an encounter with another who can lead the conversation. The result? His life is reordered. From Matthew's Gospel, Jesus says that people do not understand, and he uses parables to make his teachings more comprehensible so that they can understand with their heart. Understanding is pivotal for me personally. It's also a lifelong process, not just a one-time product. And here are a few broad strokes, useful, I hope, for living our faith. What is understanding? Let's start with two very simple examples. On the one hand, consider this seven-word statement: we must talk about the future. Now, if these words were addressed by a beloved to his partner over a quiet, candlelit dinner, they would offer a foretaste of something delightful ahead, an engagement perhaps, an upcoming trip. The meaning of those seven words would elevate expectations. On the other hand, if the boss calls for a 4:00 meeting Friday afternoon and speaks the same seven words, "We must talk about the future," the foreboding could be palpable. Layoffs? A full shutdown? How will this affect me? The meaning of those seven words might produce a sense of dread, a heaviness about the uncertain future. Words alone do not equate with meaning. Whether spoken or written, words are not on the same plane as the sense in which they are received. Words are mechanical. They're spoken or they're printed, they're written, while the intended deliverable, the idea for which the words are but a vehicle, is more abstract. It's almost ethereal. And there's still more. Consider the setting, the time and the place. A warm candlelit dinner is very different from a cold after-hours office. Context shapes the meaning. Words are like the structure of a house, but it is the space between the walls that contains the meaning of the home. Shelter from sun and rain, kibitzing around the dinner table, nurturing children, supportive care and affection for one another. Only when the meaning arises above the letter of the word can understanding reach its fullness. Now, here's a second example. In olden days, astronomers and poets alike looked toward the eastern sky at dawn and observed the morning star. At another time of the year, at sunset, in the western sky, they observed the evening star. Two different stars, two different times of the day, two different times of the year, two different names, two different meanings. Modernly, it came to be understood that the morning star and the evening star are the same thing, the planet Venus. Voila! Two apparently different things, and different meanings, to be sure, can refer to exactly the same thing. So identical words used differently can have different meanings, and different meanings can fold into the same thing. Words and meanings, meanings and words. We hear and think we understand, but sometimes it's the case, as Jesus said of his audience, no, they don't understand. Understanding calls for careful and intelligent listening to discern the meaning. So let's call meaning, then, the first pillar of understanding. Until we ferret out the true meaning, we do not have understanding. Now, why is this so important? Several areas require examination. Start with what seems the easiest, the external world. Aristotle said, "All men by nature desire to know." Simply put, we are curious creatures, so curious that even little children ring through the day with their rhythmic litany of why. But we risk losing our curiosity as we age. And we must remember Jesus' sage advice, ask, seek, knock. We sang about that this morning. ASK, ask, forms a very neat acronym for those three terms, a fit calling card for any inquirer. As to our external world, we do best if our understanding corresponds closely with external reality. Through history, people have described the world variously by myth, by an earth-centered model, or by a heliocentric model. But each change required a shift of the frame of reference by the way we understood that external world. New paradigms emerged, and that was wonderful. Now let's turn inward from the external world to ourselves. If understanding the external world is challenging, understanding ourselves is much more difficult. Socrates said, "Know thyself." You would think we would be the world's foremost experts of our own experience. After all, we are the only ones who have access, direct access to ourselves. But one thing is clear. We are unreliable narrators of our own lives. Cognitive biases warp our perception. Unconscious motivations drive our choices. Emotional flooding hijacks our reason. We invent explanations for our behavior after the fact and sincerely believe them. St. Paul asked, "Why do I do what I don't want to do and don't do what I want to do?" That's part of the internal drive to find out what's going on. Augustine gave us a model in his confession for plunging the depths of the interior life. And today, counselors and therapists help us to examine the gaps in our understanding of ourselves. Now, even our internal experience is framed. It has a paradigm of its own. Our emotions are shaped by the language we use to describe them. Our cultural narratives and the stories that we have told ourselves about who we are form some of the unexamined assumptions that drive us on. But we often lack the frames to isolate, to name, and therefore to understand ourselves. Understanding ourselves is an act of introspection, but it's also an act framed by our interpretation of ourselves. Now, if we struggle to understand ourselves, imagine the challenge of understanding another person. We can never directly access another person's experience. We cannot feel their pain, see through their eyes, inhabit their memory. We can only infer. We project, we empathize, but empathy itself is bounded by our own frames. When we empathize with someone, we do not feel what they feel. We feel what we feel if we were in their situation. And that is a fundamentally different thing. And yet, understanding is not impossible. It's just harder than we pretend it to be. Hans Georg Gadamer offered us a beautiful concept for what genuine understanding between people looks like. The fusion of horizons, not the erasure of my perspective or yours, but the creation of a new shared vantage point that neither of us occupied alone. That is what happens in the best conversations, not debate, not persuasion, not the performance of listening while you wait your turn to speak, but genuine dialogue, the kind where you are willing to be changed by the encounter, the kind where you come out the other side thinking something you could not have thought alone. That is the work. That is what understanding others demands of us. Not agreement, not capitulation, but the willingness to let another horizon reshape your own. As important as understanding is, it is also a moral act. Understanding is cognitive, but more than that, it is a matter of the heart. An ethical imperative drives true understanding. Understanding is not only cognitive, it is a process, a way of being. Jesus was the master interpreter, a master of extracting meaning from words. He said, "The law is summed up by two expressions: love God, love your neighbor." Not only does he draw out the meaning, but his summary is no less than an ethical imperative. To understand as a way of being is to be cognitively and heartfully grounded by love. So let's call ethics the second pillar of understanding as we apply our understanding and our inquiries ethically in our relationships. And if we don't do that, we have missed the heart of understanding. Now, how do we apply all this? To answer the question, I will circle back to words. How ironic. Language is an incomparable bestowment upon humankind. The Greek stories of human progress gave us Prometheus, who offers humanity the gift of fire. But in the Hebrew stories of creation, God creates mankind in his image, incorporating in that image the capacity for speech. Even as God speaks creation into being, Adam is tasked with speaking out and naming. With speech, we parse one thing from another. We reason and engage in abstract thought. The Gospel of John reframes the creation account with, "In the beginning was the Word," the Logos. Now, Logos can mean anything from a word, a sentence, a proposition, language itself, a notion, an idea, reason, the rationale undergirding the cosmos itself, and Jesus himself, the Word made flesh. With our capacity for language, we participate in that Logos, the Word. Made in the divine image, we are co-creators with God, and with language, we dissect ideas, compare thoughts, reshuffle meanings, establish agreements and disagreements, dialogue back and forth, all to gain new and better understanding, to create something new. Using language now, I ask of you, what did you mean by that? How do you know that? Can you give me an example? What are the consequences of your proposal? What if we looked at that from another perspective? These kinds of questions constitute the cognitive part of our asking and seeking for understanding. But as we use discernment, we listen before we blurt out our responses. We are charitable with our interpretations of others. we seek to find commonalities along with the differences. We do this to achieve a fusion of our horizons. These sorts of attitudes in conversation constitute the ethical part of our inquiry, and they are the knocking that will open the doors of understanding. So let us call language, then, the third pillar of understanding. Until we create new and better fusions of horizons through language in our interactions with others, we will have shortchanged our capacity to understand. Now allow me a short personal account to illustrate. During my high school years, my frame on the world had shifted to such a degree that I could no longer understand the world through the biblical lens with which I had been raised. I was dropping my church activities, and my focus was science all the way. The specific incident which brought all this to a head was my proposed entry of a project into the science fair. I did a model which I titled "The Evolution of the Sun." Well, the term evolution was a fighting term. My parents objected to my entering the project, and after much back and forth, I proposed a change of the title to "The Theoretical Evolution of the Sun," with the rationale that this was just some scientist's theory and that we need not accept it as fact. Problem solved. By the way, that project netted me a third-place finish at the science fair, and I think my parents even took a little pride in that outcome. My parents, however, continued to press me about my shifting belief structure. On one occasion, I had had my fill of their interrogation, and I exploded with, "I'm sick and tired of all the fairy tales and lies that are in the Bible which you expect me to believe." As I watched their crestfallen faces distort into surprise, disbelief of my words, hurt for being attacked on what was for them the central pillar of their meaning structures, I knew immediately that I had overstepped a boundary. These were two people who had nurtured me, and I loved them. Now their hurt also became my hurt. But there was no remedy then for the abyss between two different frames on the world. After high school, when I went up to Berkeley for university, I continued pursuing my science studies. But two extracurricular activities or events during the first term proved to be pivotal in my understanding for healing the breach. The first was a lecture by Paul Tillich, and the second was a lecture series on a German theologian, Rudolf Bultmann. While I could not assimilate all that at the time, those experiences provided me with the possibility of discovering other ways to understand the Bible and another lens with which to view religious engagement. So let me try to bring all this together. Through this brief journey, the search for meaning, the value of curiosity and inquiry into our external world, into ourselves, into our relations with others, and doing that ethically. There is one thread through it all. Understanding is not a state which we achieve, it's a practice which we sustain. Frames or perspectives are the windows by which we understand. They are how we make the pulsating confusions of reality intelligible to us. The goal is to be aware of our frames, to hold them up to the light, to recognize their edges and their blind spots, to understand what they make visible and what they hide. The hard part is to move between frames. This demands intellectual humility, the recognition that you might be wrong, at least incomplete. It demands ethical rigor, the capacity to see the world as it appears from a position you do not occupy. And it demands courage, because genuine understanding is risky. You might discover that you need to change your mind. Understanding will not happen automatically. It will only happen if we choose it, if we practice it, if we commit every day to the difficult, uncomfortable, transformative work of seeing through eyes that are not our own. So as the proverb says to us, with all thy getting, get understanding.